They laughed when she stepped onto the platform. Not a quiet laugh, but the kind that carries, the kind meant to sting. A few men nudged each other, smirking. "What's she doing here?" one of them whispered. "Wrong building, sweetheart," another muttered. Charlotte didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her eyes scanned the loaded barbell in front of her, the kind of weight most people in that room had never even attempted. She wasn't wearing sponsored gear. No flashy logos, just worn-out shoes, a plain gray t-shirt, and those thick, calloused hands. Hands that had spent years working, not posting. What happened in the next few seconds, no one expected, not even the judges. And it would be talked about long after the laughter stopped. Because Charlotte was about to do something no man in that room could, and it only took one lift. Charlotte wasn't born in a gym. She was raised in a small town with one gas station, one grocery store, and a whole lot of open land. The kind of place where people fix their own roofs, carry their own burdens, and don't ask for help unless it's truly needed. Her family lived on the edge of town, in a weathered farmhouse surrounded by rusted tractors and golden fields. Her father, a quiet man with strong hands, ran a modest farm. Her mother managed a tiny diner that smelled like fresh biscuits and black coffee. From the age of 10, Charlotte was lifting more than most grown men in town, but not in the way people think. She carried sacks of feed across uneven ground, hauled buckets of water when the pipes froze, and stacked crates twice her size in the barn. Her strength didn't come from machines or trainers. It came from life. Nobody ever clapped for her. There were no mirrors, no crowds, just sweat, sore shoulders, and sunburned skin. But slowly, quietly, that strength began to shape her, not just in her body, but in the way she thought and stood. She never saw herself as special, not back then. In fact, she got teased for it. At school, the boys called her Charlotte the Shovel. Girls kept their distance. She didn't wear makeup. She didn't giggle in class. She just did what needed doing and went home. Still, there was one person who saw her clearly, her grandfather. He was a wiry man with faded tattoos and a lifetime of stories. Every evening, he'd watch Charlotte carry logs for the fire and say, "You're strong, kid. Not just in muscle, but in spirit. That kind of strength, that stays." Charlotte never forgot those words. And maybe that's where it all began. By the time Charlotte was 19, her strength was impossible to ignore. At the local gym, one of those dimly lit, concrete-walled places that smelled like rubber mats and iron, she could deadlift more than most of the men there. But instead of respect, she got looks. Not the admiring kind. Whispers followed her from machine to machine. "Why would a girl want to look like that? Must be on something. She's probably just trying to get attention." Some even laughed when she walked in. Others avoided eye contact completely, pretending she wasn't there. One guy once told her, not even joking, "You'd be so pretty if you just toned it down." Charlotte never answered back. Not once. She just chalked her hands, adjusted her grip, and kept lifting. But behind that calm silence, something stirred. Not anger, not bitterness, something deeper. A quiet need to prove, not to them, but to herself, that her strength had a purpose. That it wasn't just weight on a bar. It was who she was, what she was becoming. She trained early in the morning before work, and late at night after it. No cameras, no social media, just clanging plates in an empty gym, and a growing fire in her chest. She heard about a regional powerlifting qualifier happening a few towns over. She circled the date in her calendar. No one she knew was going. No friends, no family, just her and the barbell. That day, she walked into the venue like a stranger stepping onto someone else's stage. And once again, the laughter started. The air inside the local qualifier meet was thick with chalk dust and ego. Posters of past champions lined the walls, men with medals, muscles, and smiles full of pride. Charlotte stepped in, wearing plain joggers, an oversized hoodie, and shoes held together by willpower and duct tape. No one recognized her, and that's exactly how they treated her. She walked past clusters of lifters, laughing loudly, their conversations filled with brand names, protein stats, and talk of records broken. One man looked her up and down and scoffed. "Are you sure you're in the right place, sweetheart? Try the Zumba class down the street." Another chuckled, not bothering to hide it. "Maybe she's here to cheer for someone." Charlotte said nothing. She just made her way to the check-in table, signed her name, and waited for her flight to be called. When her name was announced for the deadlift round, it was mispronounced. The announcer paused, then laughed. "Well, let's see what she can do." She approached the platform. The bar was set with her opening weight, heavy, but something she'd lifted dozens of times before. She chalked her hands, tightened her belt, and bent down. But as she wrapped her fingers around the bar, her body froze. Not from fear of the weight, but from the dozens of eyes staring. waiting to see her fail. Her grip wavered, her breath caught in her throat. She pulled halfway, then stumbled back. A red light flashed. No lift, a second attempt. This time, her form broke at the top. Another red light. She paced in the corner, heart pounding. Her hands trembled, not from fatigue, but from self-doubt, creeping in like a shadow. Her third and final attempt came. She pulled with everything she had, but the bar didn't move. Silence. No applause. No sympathy. Just whispers. Told you. Knew it. She's out of her league. Charlotte walked off the platform, not looking back. The medal wasn't what stung. It was the laughter, the smug grins, the way no one thought she belonged there. But as she stepped outside into the fading afternoon light, something hardened inside her. She wasn't angry. She was awake. And she knew this wasn't where her story ended. Charlotte sat on the edge of the parking lot, her gym bag beside her, the cold pavement beneath her. The crowd inside kept cheering for others, not for her. She didn't cry. She never did. But something about today felt heavy. She stared at her calloused hands, the ones that had built barns and hauled hay bales since she was a kid. And for the first time in years, they didn't feel strong. They just felt tired. Then, from behind, a voice, calm, weathered, but firm. Your grip gave out, not your strength. Charlotte turned. A woman stood there, maybe in her late 50s. Short gray hair, no makeup. A faded flannel shirt with sleeves rolled up and eyes that had seen it all. I watched your lifts, she said, walking closer. You didn't fail because you weren't ready. You failed because you forgot who you are. Charlotte blinked, confused. Do I know you? The woman smiled softly. Not yet. Name's Grace. Turns out, Grace was once a legend. An old school lifter from the days before sponsorships and social media. She'd broken records no one remembered, trained champions no one talked about. Then one day she just disappeared from the scene, burned out, disillusioned. But something about Charlotte reminded her of herself before the lights, before the pressure, before the world taught her to doubt. You've got raw power, Grace said, but you're lifting for their approval, not your purpose. That's why you're stuck. Charlotte sat in silence. You want to get better? Grace asked. Charlotte nodded. Then you'll meet me tomorrow at 6 a.m. No gym, no mirrors, just work. Charlotte hesitated. Why me? She finally asked. Grace looked at her for a long moment. Because you didn't whine. You didn't blame. You walked out with your head up. That's rare. That's someone I can train. And just like that, the next chapter began. Not in a high-end gym or with fancy equipment, but in a dusty garage behind Grace's house, where the only audience was an old radio and a hanging light bulb, where strength had nothing to prove and everything to reclaim. 6 months passed, quietly, without applause. Charlotte trained in Grace's garage through rain, cold, and heat. No distractions, no shortcuts, just the clank of iron, the rhythm of breath, and the hum of discipline. Every morning started before sunrise. They worked on everything: posture, form, and mindset. Grace didn't let her chase heavy numbers at first. She made her rebuild from the ground up. We don't lift to impress, Grace would say. We lift to express. Charlotte was stronger than ever, but more than that, she was focused, still unshakable. Then, one evening, as Charlotte wiped sweat from her brow and packed up her gear, Grace handed her an envelope. Inside was an official invitation. The Apex Open, one of the biggest regional competitions in the state. Elite lifters, top-tier coaches, a crowd of hundreds. It wasn't just a meet, it was a statement. Charlotte's eyes widened. You signed me up? Grace nodded. You're ready. The Apex Open was held in a massive arena. Bright lights blazing down on platforms built like stages. It wasn't the kind of place you quietly walked into. It demanded presence and confidence, and it had egos. Lifters arrived in luxury vans, wearing brand-sponsored gear, posting live stories on social media, with hashtags like #Alpha Mode and #Barbell Beast. Charlotte showed up in a dusty pickup truck, hair tied back, hoodie zipped to the neck. No spotlight, no entourage, just her and Grace. As they entered, someone bumped her shoulder. A tall man with sculpted arms, surrounded by 3 others. He glanced at her, then smirked. Didn't know they were letting the cleaning crew compete. The group laughed. Charlotte didn't blink. Grace leaned in, whispering, "They'll underestimate you. Let them." Everywhere she looked, there were polished bodies, expensive shoes, and people measuring each other up. But Charlotte wasn't there to fit in. She was there to finish something she started long ago, and this time, she wasn't alone. Charlotte kept her head down in the warm-up area, stretching quietly, tuning everything else out. But the whispers found her anyway. Who even is she? Looks like she wandered in from a barn. She's not even wearing lifting shoes. Are those running sneakers? Laughter followed every comment. It wasn't loud, but loud enough. Charlotte focused on her breath, in through the nose, out through the mouth. She'd been here before, not this arena, not this stage, but this feeling, judged, dismissed, laughed at, and she remembered something Grace had told her just the day before. Let them talk. Talk is cheap, steel isn't. Just then, one of the lifters from earlier, the tall one with the sculpted arms, walked up to her again. Are you sure you're in the right division? He asked, flashing a fake smile. This isn't CrossFit. You're going to embarrass yourself, girl. Charlotte looked up, calm and steady. We'll see. His friends laughed behind him, one whispering, she's probably here for Instagram content. Charlotte didn't even flinch, but the tension in the room was building. You could feel it. Some lifters began lining up to check the order of events. Charlotte's name was listed, misspelled, and shoved between names with titles like State Champion and National Finalist. More smirks, more side eyes, but Charlotte didn't come to prove them wrong. She came to prove herself right. As she laced up her worn-out shoes and stepped into position behind the curtain, Grace placed a hand gently on her shoulder. They think you don't belong. That's fine. Just show them why they're wrong, without saying a word. And Charlotte nodded, because she wasn't there to speak. She was there to lift. Charlotte's name was called. Some in the crowd didn't even look up from their phones. Others tilted their heads, curious, expecting a quick attempt, maybe a stumble, then a red light. She stepped onto the platform, alone under the lights. No coach yelling cues, no music, just silence and steel. The weight on the bar was heavy, not record-breaking, but enough to make people pay attention. Charlotte approached with quiet confidence. She didn't strut. She didn't hype herself up. She just moved. She chalked her hands, tightened her belt, placed her feet, took one deep breath, and then, in one clean, powerful motion, she lifted. The bar rose with control. No shaking, no struggle. It was smooth, solid, perfect. A judge nodded. 3 white lights flashed. The room, once indifferent, paused. There were no cheers, just a shift. A moment of silence that said, wait, that wasn't expected. Charlotte walked off the platform without a glance toward the crowd. Some lifters had turned to look now. A few were whispering, but this time, it wasn't laughter. One of them muttered, that was clean. Charlotte sat down near Grace, wiped her hands, and sipped water. Grace leaned over and said quietly, good. Now let's see if they keep laughing. The second round was announced. This time, Charlotte added more weight. Again, she approached the bar with the same focus, the same calm. She lifted, flawless. Another set of white lights. Another ripple went through the audience. The smirks were fading now, replaced by raised eyebrows and stolen glances. Charlotte wasn't performing. She wasn't posing. She was building something, rep by rep, moment by moment, and the room was beginning to notice. The final round was different. This wasn't just another lift. This was the lift. The one that separated the strong from the unforgettable. The bar was loaded with a weight that made the platform creak. It was more than Charlotte had ever lifted in competition. More than some lifters had ever attempted. It was the kind of number that didn't just test your body. It tested everything inside you. Charlotte stood backstage, staring at the bar. Her fingers tapped against her thighs. Her breath was slow but focused. Grace stood beside her, arms crossed. This isn't about numbers anymore, she said. It's about whether or not you believe the truth, that you were never the weak one. Charlotte nodded once. Then, they called her name. This time, people looked up. Phones came out. Even the lifters who mocked her earlier turned toward the stage. One of them scoffed. She won't even get it off the ground. Another smirked. She's gonna hurt herself. But Charlotte didn't hear any of it. She stepped onto the platform like she'd done it 1,000 times, because in her mind, she had. She approached the bar. Everything else disappeared. No crowd, no whispers, no ego, just her and the weight. She gripped the bar, closed her eyes for a second. Her grandfather's words echoed in her head. You're strong, kid, not just in muscle, but in spirit. And then she pulled. The bar didn't move at first. Her legs trembled, her back flexed, but she didn't stop. The bar started to rise, inch by inch, like time itself had slowed down. The crowd leaned forward, her arms locked, her breath held. And then she stood tall, full lockout. The buzzer sounded. The lights flashed. 3 white lights. She did it. She held the bar for a second longer, long enough for everyone to see that it wasn't luck. Then she lowered it to the floor, calm and controlled. Silence. Then, an eruption. Gasps, cheers, shocked applause. One of the judges leaned back in his seat, wide-eyed. A man in the front row just shook his head in disbelief. Even the lifters who mocked her stood up. Charlotte didn't flex. She didn't raise her arms. She just walked off the stage, quietly, like she'd done what she came to do, because she had. For a moment, the entire arena stood still. No clapping, no shouting, just Silence. Charlotte stood near the edge of the platform, head down, wrapping her belt. The kind of silence that follows something no one expected, the kind that demands respect. Then, slowly, applause. Not wild, not forced, but real. One of the judges nodded with quiet approval. Another shook his head, muttering under his breath, "Unbelievable." In the crowd, someone whispered, "Who is she?" Charlotte didn't answer. She didn't need to. She walked back toward the warm-up area, each step deliberate, not proud, not arrogant, just steady. The same men who had mocked her now stood aside, eyes lowered, their laughter gone, their smirks replaced with something else, a quiet, reluctant awe. Even the tall lifter, the loudest of them all, just stared at her, arms crossed, no words. His friends glanced at him, waiting for a reaction. He said nothing. Grace met Charlotte at the side of the platform. She didn't smile, didn't speak. She just placed a hand on her shoulder and nodded. It was enough, because this wasn't about proving anything to them anymore. This was about reclaiming her place, her strength, her voice, without ever raising it. In a room full of noise, Charlotte had said everything that needed saying, with silence. Later that evening, as the awards ceremony began, Charlotte stood at the back of the room, not near the podium, not waiting for applause. She didn't need a trophy to know what she had accomplished. But when her name was called for Best Overall Performance, the crowd turned. Some clapped hesitantly, others genuinely. She walked up quietly, no smile, no speech, just a nod and a soft thank you. Reporters tried to approach her afterward. One asked, "Who trained you? Where did you come from?" Charlotte just replied, "From the same place strength does, hard work and silence." Another asked if she had anything to say to her critics. She paused, then said, "The bar doesn't care how you look. It only knows who can lift it." Grace, standing off to the side, smiled for the first time that day. Charlotte didn't stay long. She packed her bag, tossed her hoodie over her shoulders, and headed for the exit. No celebration, no spotlight, just peace. Because that's what happens when you know who you are. You don't chase applause. You walk away with purpose. She wasn't just the girl they laughed at anymore. She was the woman who lifted what no man there could, and never said a word about it. Moral of the story: real strength doesn't need to shout. Sometimes, the loudest statement is made by the quietest person in the room. Not to prove others wrong, but to finally prove yourself right. Have you ever been laughed at before you even had the chance to show who you really are? Maybe it was your appearance, your silence, your strength that didn't look the way people expected it to. Charlotte's story isn't just about lifting weight. It's about lifting past judgment, doubt, and noise. It's about knowing your worth, even when no one else does, and staying grounded when the world tries to shake you. Because the truth is, you don't have to prove anything to anyone. When you show up with quiet focus, with heart, with discipline, your results will speak. And the people who once mocked you, they'll be the first to fall silent. Have you ever surprised someone who underestimated you? Tell us your story in the comments. We read everyone. The most powerful strength isn't in how loud you are, it's in how calm you remain when the world doubts you the most. If you believe in silent strength, quiet confidence, and stories that matter, subscribe to join our growing community. We share stories like Charlotte's every week, because sometimes all it takes is one lift to change the way the world sees you forever.